They say money makes you untouchable. At 30,000 feet, I learned how wrong that was. The moment I stepped into the first-class cabin, every head turned, not because they knew who I was, but because of the way I looked. I'd been used to that silence that follows a black man in a suit, curious, polite, but laced with judgment. Still, I smiled, as I always do. The world likes its rich people confident, not defensive. My name's Ethan Caldwell, and I built my fortune in the technology world. 5 years ago, I was the man Forbes called Silicon Valley's quiet disruptor. Now, after 2 acquisitions and 1 failed marriage, I was just another millionaire chasing silence above the clouds. I was flying from New York to Los Angeles, a routine business trip, at least. That's what I thought. The first-class cabin shimmered in understated luxury. Leather seats, soft amber lighting, the faint hum of engines that sounded like money burning smoothly. The flight attendant, a blonde woman with a rehearsed smile, greeted me coolly. "Mr. Caldwell, welcome aboard," she said. But her eyes flicked toward my boarding pass twice, as if double-checking I belonged there. I pretended not to notice. I'd learned long ago that dignity sometimes meant pretending not to hear. My seatmate arrived a few minutes later, a teenage boy, no older than 16, carrying a worn backpack and a cheap denim jacket. His nervous hands clutched a boarding pass like it might vanish if he blinked. I caught the whisper between 2 other passengers. "Economy must be full." The boy smiled politely as he sat down. "Good evening, sir," he said, voice low but steady. "Evening," I replied, returning the nod. I noticed how he folded his jacket neatly, as though afraid to crease it. How his shoes were polished but old. He reminded me of myself before the world softened its tone for me. Then it began. The same flight attendant returned, her smile tighter now. "Excuse me," she said to the boy. "There's been a mistake. This seat is reserved for preferred passengers." The cabin went silent. The boy frowned, confused. "But this is my seat," he said softly, handing her his boarding pass. She barely glanced at it. "I'm sure you're mistaken." Her tone was sharp now, the kind people use when they want to sound polite while humiliating you. I waited for someone to intervene. No one did. People looked away, pretending to scroll through their phones. I did nothing too. That's the part that still haunts me. The way I just sat there. The boy's eyes flickered between us, searching for help. "Mom," he whispered, "I bought this seat. My mom saved up." "Sir, please move," she cut him off. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Her hand hovered near his arm. Something in me tightened. I wanted to say something, to tell her to stop, but I didn't. Maybe I told myself it wasn't my place. Maybe I just didn't want to cause a scene. When the boy finally stood up, cheeks flushed with shame, our eyes met. In that brief second, I saw something. Hurt, pride, maybe disappointment in people like me, who watch but stay silent. He walked to the back of the plane. She thanked me for my patience, as if I'd done her a favor. That night, I realized that silence can be a kind of violence too. And as the engines roared toward Los Angeles, I began to wonder. For the next hour, I pretended to work. The tablet screen glowed in front of me, graphs and emails blurring together. But all I could see was that kid's face as he walked down the aisle. Every few minutes, the flight attendant's voice floated through the cabin. Bright, polished, practiced. She laughed with the businessman across from me, offered champagne to the woman in pearls, poured coffee for the man who hadn't stopped bragging about his golf club membership since we took off. But she never went near the back. Every time she passed my row, she avoided eye contact, like we shared a secret she didn't want to name. Maybe we did. I'd been complicit. I told myself there was nothing I could have done, that the boy probably got another seat, that it wasn't my responsibility to fix every act of ignorance. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. I wasn't afraid of confrontation. I was afraid of being uncomfortable. That was my real luxury, comfort, the kind that numbs you until you mistake cowardice for civility. The turbulence light flicked on. The plane shuddered gently. Somewhere behind me, I heard a faint cough, then the soft click of a call button. It was his voice, the boy's, apologetic, quiet. "Ma'am, could I get some water, please?" No response. I turned slightly, pretending to stretch, and saw him. He was sitting between 2 large men in business suits, his knees tucked close, trying to make himself smaller. His lips looked dry. He pressed the call button again. Still nothing. The attendant walked past, collecting glasses. She saw the light blinking above his seat but kept moving. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was guilt, maybe anger, maybe both. I unbuckled my seatbelt and stood. Heads turned. The businessman across from me frowned, clearly annoyed. "Sir, seatbelt signs on," he muttered. I ignored him. I walked toward the back. The cabin seemed longer than I remembered, every step heavier than the last. When I reached the boy's row, his eyes widened in surprise. I smiled softly. "You all right, kid?" He nodded, hesitant. "Just wanted some water." I turned to the attendant, who was a few feet away pretending to rearrange napkins. "Excuse me," I said evenly. "This passenger's been trying to get your attention for a while." Her smile tightened. "Sir, please return to your seat. We're experiencing turbulence." "We both know that's not the reason," I replied quietly. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air felt heavier than the pressure outside the cabin windows. Then, in a tone meant to remind me who held authority here, she said, "Sir, I don't appreciate your insinuations." I met her gaze. "And I don't appreciate watching a paying passenger being ignored because of the color of his skin." A murmur spread through the cabin. Someone started filming. She froze, realizing what that meant. The boy looked down, cheeks flushed. But there was something different this time. A flicker of relief, of recognition that he wasn't invisible. I handed him my unopened bottle of water. "Here, don't let anyone tell you where you belong." When I returned to my seat, my heart was still pounding. For the first time that night, I didn't open my tablet. I just stared out the window into the dark, endless sky, and wondered how many times I'd chosen silence before, and how many people it had cost. The engines hummed, steady and indifferent as the storm outside cleared. But inside me, something had started to change. I couldn't sleep after that. Even as the cabin dimmed and the other passengers reclined into their curated peace, my mind wouldn't rest. The hum of the engine sounded louder now, like a quiet accusation that wouldn't stop echoing. The boy, his name was Jaden, I learned later, had fallen asleep a few rows behind me. Every so often, I glanced back and caught the dim light from his phone screen reflecting on his face. There was something heartbreakingly innocent about the way he slept, head resting against the window, backpack clutched against his chest, as if afraid it might disappear. When the flight attendant passed again, she avoided me entirely. I could feel the resentment radiating from her, but underneath it, there was fear. The kind that comes when someone realizes their power isn't absolute anymore. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. For most of my life, I'd believed in the illusion of control, that if you worked hard enough, dressed sharp enough, earned enough zeros, you could outrun the parts of America that whispered you don't belong here. But sitting in that overpriced seat, I realized I hadn't outrun anything. I'd just built a taller fence around my own silence. A tap on my shoulder pulled me out of my thoughts. It was one of the senior flight attendants, a woman with silver hair and eyes that carried the weight of too many flights. "Mr. Caldwell," she said softly, "I just wanted to say thank you. Not everyone would have done what you did." Her words landed heavier than she intended. Because what had I really done? Offered a bottle of water, spoken a single sentence after an hour of cowardice. That wasn't courage. That was conscience arriving late to the scene. I nodded politely. "Just did what anyone should have done," I said, though I didn't believe it. A few minutes later, the captain announced our descent into Los Angeles. Lights flickered on, and people began to stretch, fixing their hair, pretending nothing uncomfortable had ever happened. But the air felt different now. Tense, aware, almost fragile. Then came the announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. On behalf of Sky Nation Airlines, we apologize for any inconvenience experienced during this flight." It was subtle, neutral, PR language at its finest. But everyone knew what it referred to. Even the flight attendant who'd started it all flinched slightly. When we touched down, the passengers clapped half-heartedly. I waited as the others stood, eager to escape their collective guilt. Then I turned around. Jaden was still seated, waiting patiently, eyes lowered. "Come on," I said, gesturing for him to go ahead. He looked surprised. "Thanks, sir," he murmured. We walked off the plane together. The air in the terminal was cool and bright, filled with the sounds of a city that never stops pretending it's awake. As we reached the gate, I turned to him. "Listen," I said, hesitating. "I should have spoken up sooner." He smiled, small, tired, but real. "You did, though," he said. "Most people never do." Then he disappeared into the crowd. his denim jacket vanishing among the suits and rolling luggage. I stood there for a while, watching people rush past me, all of us moving towards somewhere else, pretending we weren't leaving pieces of ourselves behind. When I finally walked out into the California sunlight, the warmth hit me like truth, undeniable, uncomfortable, but cleansing. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about money or business or power. I was thinking about the kind of man I wanted to be when no one was watching. Los Angeles greeted me with its usual contradiction. Sunlight that looked pure but felt artificial, air that smelled like ambition and exhaust. I stepped out of the terminal, briefcase in one hand, guilt in the other. The driver held a sign with my name on it. "Mr. Caldwell," he called. I nodded, climbed into the black SUV, and sank into the leather seat. As we pulled away from the airport, I caught my reflection in the tinted window. Sharp suit, polished shoes, expensive watch, all the armor that money builds. And still, I'd never felt smaller. The city rolled past in fragments, palm trees, billboards, strangers. My mind replayed the flight again and again, the silence, the humiliation, the boy's eyes. Every version ended the same way, with me doing nothing until it was almost too late. At the hotel, I was supposed to head straight to a board meeting. Instead, I found myself sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the complimentary bottle of wine waiting on the table. My phone buzzed with messages, investors, assistants, reminders, all the noise of a life that looked perfect on paper. But I couldn't escape the image of Jaden's hands gripping that boarding pass like it was proof he belonged in the world. I opened my laptop. Not to check stocks or emails, but to find him. It wasn't easy. The airline's privacy walls were solid. But then I remembered the video, the one someone had recorded when I confronted the flight attendant. It had been online for less than 12 hours, and it already had 2 million views. I clicked play. There I was, standing in the aisle, voice steady, expression controlled. In the comments, people called me a hero. They praised my courage, my dignity, my stand for justice. I wanted to throw up, because I knew the truth. I hadn't stood for anything. I'd simply arrived late to my own humanity. The comments weren't about me. They were about a country that still found surprise in decency. And that realization cut deeper than any insult ever could. The next morning, I cancelled my meetings. My assistant panicked, but I didn't explain. I took a cab instead. Not the company car, not the driver who opened doors and called me sir. I went to a small community centre downtown, one I'd once donated to without ever stepping inside. It worked with underprivileged youth, kids like Jaden. The director, an older black woman with silver braids, recognized me from the news. "Mr. Caldwell," she said cautiously. "We didn't expect—" "I know," I interrupted gently. "I didn't expect to come either. I spent the day there. I listened more than I spoke. Kids laughed, argued, dreamed out loud. No filters, no first-class manners. Just raw, beautiful noise. When I left, the sun was setting, soft, forgiving. That night, I drafted a statement for the airline, not as a CEO or investor, but as a passenger who'd seen what silence costs. I didn't want an apology that sounded rehearsed. I wanted change. New training, real accountability, more voices like Jaden's being heard. I wasn't sure if it would fix anything, but it was a start. As I closed my laptop, I finally exhaled. For the first time in a long while, it's been 3 weeks since that flight, and I still think about it every night. Not the champagne, not the polished aisles or the first-class service, just the sound of that call button clicking in the silence, the soft voice asking for water, and the way everyone, including me, pretended not to hear. I used to think success insulated you from ugliness. That money, in some way, bought distance from the world's injustices. But now I see it differently. It doesn't buy distance, it buys distraction. It lets you live above the noise, until one day the noise forces its way through the clouds and sits beside you. I haven't spoken to Jaden since that day, but sometimes I scroll through the video comments and see people wondering about him, where he is, what happened after. Someone wrote, "Maybe he grew up believing people can change." I hope that's true, because I'm still learning how. The airline issued an official statement last week. They fired the flight attendant, launched an investigation, and offered me some kind of partnership for diversity initiatives. I declined. I didn't want to be the face of their redemption. I wanted them to earn it. Instead, I funded a scholarship under Jaden's name, the Skyrise Fellowship, for underprivileged students who dream of working in aviation or technology. It felt small, almost selfish, like trying to pay a debt that couldn't be repaid, but it was something real. Sometimes, at night, I replay the descent into Los Angeles in my mind, the soft thud of the landing gear, the city lights stretching beneath us like circuits of gold. I remember looking out that window and realizing how fragile everything I'd built really was. Success, reputation, pride, they all feel meaningless if you can't meet your own reflection with respect. One evening, after leaving the community center, I took a walk down Venice Beach. The air was cool, salt-heavy, and the horizon looked endless. I watched a boy, maybe 12, flying a red kite against the fading sky. He was laughing, running barefoot in the sand, unafraid of falling. For some reason, it reminded me of Jaden again, of the way he'd looked back at me before walking down that aisle. That look wasn't just disappointment, it was a question. Will you remember? And the truth is, I do, every day. I've started noticing things I never used to. The small hesitations in people's voices, the tired patience of the ones who've been overlooked too long, the subtle cruelties that hide inside politeness. I speak up more now, not with grand speeches, but with quiet insistence. Sometimes people roll their eyes, sometimes it makes no difference, but sometimes it changes something. A few days ago, a woman at a cafe dropped her wallet. A teenager, black like Jaden, picked it up and handed it back. She hesitated before saying thank you, just a second too long. I caught her eye and smiled at the boy. Nice catch, I said. It was nothing, but maybe that's how change begins. Small, invisible, until it isn't. As the waves rolled in that evening, I realized I wasn't looking for forgiveness anymore. I was looking for presence, for the courage to be awake in a world that's too comfortable with sleeping through injustice. I turned back toward the city, lights flickering like stars we'd built ourselves, imperfect and human. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was walking toward it, and somewhere above me, a plane crossed the sky, its light steady, its path sure, carrying strangers who might never meet, but who one day might choose not to look away. 6 months later, I was back on a plane. Different route this time, Los Angeles to Chicago. A red-eye flight filled with tired faces and the soft glow of laptop screens. I hadn't planned to fly again so soon, but business has a way of pulling you back into the sky. Still, something felt different. Maybe it was me. The world outside the window looked the same as it always had. Clouds glowing under the moonlight, a quiet sea of white. But for the first time, I wasn't watching them with detachment. I wasn't thinking about deadlines or mergers or how much I hated turbulence. I was thinking about the people on this flight, all of them anonymous, each carrying stories I'd never know. A young mother across the aisle bounced a baby gently on her lap. 2 college students whispered excitedly about a project, and somewhere a few rows back, a man hummed softly to himself, a gospel tune barely audible over the engines. It was peaceful, not perfect, but human. When the flight attendant approached, I braced instinctively. Old reflex. She smiled, genuinely this time. "Mr. Caldwell, can I get you anything?" "Just water," I said. Her badge read T. Rivers. She couldn't have been older than 25, maybe just starting her career. There was kindness in her face, the kind that doesn't need to be rehearsed. Halfway through the flight, I noticed her helping an elderly passenger with his oxygen tank. She kneeled beside him, patient, soft-spoken. No hesitation, no judgment, just care. For reasons I couldn't explain, it made my chest tighten. I remembered Jaden again, his silence, his composure. I wondered if he'd ever taken another flight, if he still looked out the window the way he did that night, chasing something higher than fear. I reached for my briefcase and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was the latest update from the Skyrise Fellowship. The first group of recipients had been selected, 50 students. 50 chances at a different future. I traced my finger over one name, Jaden Carter. He'd applied. He'd been accepted. I didn't know how he'd found it, or if he even realized the scholarship bore his name. Maybe that was better. I didn't want gratitude. I just wanted him to fly again, on his own terms. The captain's voice crackled over the speakers. "Folks, we've hit some unexpected crosswinds. Please fasten your seatbelts. The plane shook gently. I gripped the armrest, not out of fear, but reflex. Around me, passengers stirred, murmuring. The young mother whispered a prayer under her breath. I caught her eye and smiled. It's all right, I said. You're safe. As the turbulence passed, I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Outside, dawn was breaking. Faint streaks of orange spreading across the clouds. The beauty of it caught me off guard. Every sunrise looks different at 30,000 feet. Maybe that's the point. Perspective only changes when you rise above what you used to accept. I closed my eyes, feeling the hum of the engines beneath me, steady, alive, relentless. Somewhere behind me, someone laughed softly. Somewhere else, someone cried quietly. We were all suspended together between what we'd done and who we might still become. And in that moment, I realized redemption isn't a destination. It's a flight with no arrival. Just the courage to keep moving forward, to stay awake, to listen. The seatbelt sign flicked off. The sky ahead was clear, and as the plane began its slow descent into Chicago, I whispered to myself, not as a prayer, but as a promise. Never again will I look away. It's been a year since that night, a full rotation of seasons, business trips, board meetings, birthdays, all the ordinary things that make up an extraordinary lie called moving on. But I've learned that some stories don't end when the plane lands. They stay with you, quietly rewriting who you are when no one's looking. My days are simpler now. I still run my company, but not like before. I stopped chasing every deal, every headline, every ounce of validation the world demands as proof that you matter. I let younger voices speak louder, and sometimes I actually listen. Most mornings I walk to a small cafe in Santa Monica, order black coffee, and sit by the window overlooking the ocean. The regulars know me by name now, just Ethan, not Mr. Caldwell. There's something humbling about that. It reminds me that dignity doesn't need titles. Across the street, there's a flight path where jets rise over the Pacific, silver trails cutting through blue. Every time I see one, I still think about Jaden, not with guilt anymore, with gratitude. Because that boy gave me back something I didn't even know I'd lost, the ability to feel the weight of other people's stories. One morning, about a month ago, I got a letter. No return address, just my name in neat, careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Dear Mr. Caldwell, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. Thank you for standing up that night. I'm studying aerospace engineering now. I want to build something that helps people fly, not just planes, but chances. Maybe someday we'll meet again. Jay, I must have read it a dozen times. Every word felt like sunlight after a long storm. I didn't reply, there was no way to, but I didn't need to. Some moments don't ask to be completed. They just ask to be honored. That letter sits on my desk now, next to a photo of my daughter when she was little. She's 23, engaged, and far kinder than I deserve. A few weeks ago, she told me she'd watched the video from that flight. She looked at me and said, I'm proud of you, Dad. Not for what you did, for what you became after. And I think that's what redemption really is. Not a grand gesture, not a headline, just the quiet work of becoming someone better, again and again, even when no one's watching. In the evenings, I walk along the beach as the sun sinks low, turning the sky into fire and gold. Sometimes I see kids running across the sand, chasing kites, their laughter echoing against the waves. And I think, maybe the world isn't fixed, but it's still fixable. One small act of courage at a time. The wind off the ocean smells like salt and second chances. I breathe it in and look toward the horizon. Another plane passes overhead, its engines low and steady. Somewhere on that flight, there's a man staring out the window, thinking about the choices he didn't make. And maybe, just maybe, he'll decide next time to do something different. As for me, I don't fly as often anymore, but when I do, I always look down through the window before landing. The streets, the people, the lights, all so fragile, all so connected, and I remind myself of one simple truth. Every act of kindness is its own kind of flight, and every time we choose to see, really see, another person's pain, the ground feels a little more like the sky.